Hello, I'm Roger Bisby from the Skill Builder channel, back with another one of my little videos on walking around London, looking specifically at the building of London. We're in Eaton Square, which is, if you're looking for a cheap house in London, don't look here. In fact, if you're looking for a cheap house in London, don't look anywhere. These flats, these apartments, these houses cost millions and millions of pounds. When you've got a lot of money, you build a big house like this, you have a lot of servants, and if you watched programs such as Upstairs, Downstairs, you will know that they had lots and lots of servants working away in the basements of these houses. But they also had transport, they had coaches, they had footmen. And what I want to deal with in this video is the Mews houses, which are where the coaches and the horses and the footmen and the grooms lived and looked after the horses, so they could bring them round the front here whenever the occupants of these houses wanted to go for a little ride. And of course now they have chauffeurs sitting there waiting, reading a book or watching a video, as probably they do now. A little known fact, I was actually a London chauffeur for a year. In between travelling abroad, I came back to England and I needed a job quickly, and I saw an advert for a London chauffeur and I applied and got the job. And that's when I started to really learn my way around London, back in the day when there was no sat-nav. So here we have the grand facades of the buildings, and almost unseen is the Mews, which was carried on with this stucco, this ashlar facade here, the arch. Anyway, let's walk through into the Mews itself. And when you get into here, this is where the horses were kept, this is where the carriages, and almost exclusively there's still cobblestone mews, which is very nice indeed. As we go around each one of these houses, by the way, these were the cheap houses, the stables, and each one of these is now several £1 million. So here's another Mews, which has definitely got a feeling of don't come in here, mate, about it. It says 1913. I'm guessing that's when the gates were erected in front of it and given themselves a nice little haven in there, haven't they? I'm sure they don't want me poking in there. So these became very trendy little places after the horse and carriages disappeared, and they were used for cars as garages, but eventually they were changed into accommodation. And you can see here that what would have been the garages have been filled in by these little sort of Georgian style facades. None of that would have been original. They look very smart now, don't they? This would have been more like it, this garage here. This is what you would have had. Stable doors. But you can see everywhere you look, you can see this protection against the horse and carriages. There are little bollards everywhere just to stop the wheels of the carriages scraping the walls. So here's another one, Eaton Terrace Mews. Got the old CCTV cameras everywhere you go. I can't really complain about lack of privacy, can I? Because I'm doing exactly the same thing. See here, by the way, these are the boiler flues. One of those is the air intake, that one there. And the other one is the exhaust fume. And if you're wondering what these little things are, by the way, they are the vents for the sewers. They used to have a little mica flap on them that stopped the smells coming out, but in a lot of cases they're long gone. You can see that each one of these would have been venting a manhole, and on the manhole is a U-bend and an interceptor, which very often blocks up. If you're a drain unclearing specialist, you know that when you see one of those vents, there'd be a manhole somewhere, like this one down here. I love all these manholes, by the way, all cast Chelsea, London. They usually have the name of the foundry on them. So here's another little sewer vent, and into it somebody's put a rainwater with the bracket the wrong way round. I reckon they stabbed that in there afterwards. Quite a nice idea though. But all the rainwater's coming down over the cobbles here, and presumably it runs towards this central drain. But you can see at one point they would have had other drains here, because these were stables and the horses and the mucking out, they would have been washed down. There would have been a lot of manure. Let's call it manure. Yeah, this is quite interesting, isn't it? A little panel. Now what would that be? That would be some kind of meter cupboard, or maybe a place to deposit parcels, I don't know. Some kind of cupboard there anyway. Somebody's cleverly stuck some bricks on. Back in the day you would have had coal chutes as well, because these buildings would have had to be heated. There's another one, electricity supply, so maybe it's a meter. Can't really see the meter reader opening it. Not that we have meter readers anymore. There's a nice little pub. Have I mentioned I love a London pub? So, although these houses were originally built as single accommodation, a lot of them have been converted. You can tell by the number of doorbells just how many people live in a particular property, but very often you'll find down in the basement flat, they've got a little house down there. Again, you might be paying £1 million to live in a little subterranean haunt like that. And of course, whenever you've got buildings below ground, you're likely to have damp. These specialist companies are never very far away. Eat your heart out, Peter Ward, because although you say ventilate, ventilate, let the property breathe, you can see the little vent there. As much as you might try, it's very, very difficult to get an airflow below ground. What we have here is little coal holes. So under this pavement is actually part of the house. So the coal merchants would have come and opened up that trap and hopefully made sure nobody fall down it while they poured sacks of coal in there. So it says on the outside of here, I'm just making out the writing on here, it says to be fixed with Portland cement, which is interesting because you would have thought, okay, that's natural, but at the time that these places were built, there was a lot of sand and lime. Telling people that you've got to fix it with something other than sand and lime, a bit of Portland cement, is a great thing. Quite how they got those up, I don't know, because there's no keyhole on them. So maybe they just had a whacking great magnet that they put on. But aren't they beautiful? Each one of these is different design and they've all got the name of the foundry on them. I'm getting waylaid now because I could just start looking at these covers all day long because I find them quite fascinating for some strange, sad reason. And when you look at this rendered wall here, this is what they call the ugly hour. And this is when the sun hits the wall sideways on and you see what you thought was a nice rendering job isn't very nice at all. It's not been ruled off very well. I mean, when people complain about my plastering and rendering, I was never that bad. Well, maybe I was once, but I could certainly do better than that now. Incidentally, we might be doing a bit of rendering soon with Kirk Johnston, so that'll be nice to look forward to. And here's another little Mews. We're looking for the back end of this one. And in here we've got some of the original gas lights, probably, though they've been converted to LEDs now. Now, this is very nice. They've left the facade and the originals, but behind it I think is a room. So here at the end there's an arch and it's been filled in, although you never know with these things. It could have been like that originally and they just kind of kept the arch but blanked it off. But I think probably it was open at one time, so they had a good run through, because the last thing you want to be doing is bringing a horse and carriage around a sharp corner. So having a good run in and run out with the horses is always a good idea. Now, if you look along the top of this beam here, you can see all these little weep holes, and they're really draining the cavity of any water. So that suggests that the whole front of this building has been rebuilt with a big steel beam along there and behind that cladding, and the cavity wall drains just above that, if you like. There's a cavity tray there. That means that it's all cavity wall, all modern construction. I wouldn't be surprised if a whole lot was just ripped out, flattened, and then they just built from the ground up. So here's another approach to the infill. They've kind of put this little, what I would consider quite twee little Georgian portico in here, and try to make it look like it was original building, but it never would have been like that. It never would have been there. That would have been far too posh for the kind of people that lived in here, the grooms and the stable boys and everything else. But, you know, it's good that people are allowed to kind of express their individuality, do what they want with these buildings, even though this is a conservation area, so they do control what's done to some extent. Because they're tucked away here, they kind of leave them to experiment, which I think is a good thing. Now, you can see this is another new build from the ground up. It may have even been bomb damage at some point. Look at that lovely domed roof. Now, there's a conservatory rather than your normal old plastic shack. This is the sort of thing that you'd normally find in a spa town, an English spa town, like Bath or Harrogate or somewhere. I mean, this whole building has been cement rendered, sand and cement rendered, and they've made it look like the old ashlar from the Romans, and it was a clever idea. They used to put bits of timber in there and then render to it and then pull the timbers out and just tidy it up, and it's a lovely looking effect. But the only trouble is that these were old sand and lime buildings, and They kind of just moved very, very slightly over the seasons, and they settled, and those minute movements in the brick courses never ever showed because the sand and lime was very forgiving, and to a certain extent it would kind of repair itself. The lime just repaired itself. If it cracked on the mortar line, it would kind of knit itself back together. So it was a great idea. And then of course, as soon as you render it like this, you put this really strong, tight coat of strong sand and cement all the way around it. And basically you've made a straitjacket for the building. It now can't move, but it's going to move. At some point it's going to move, and that's where you see those cracks. So when you use a really strong render, that's almost inevitable that you're going to get these cracks. Now, if you'd been lucky enough to buy one of these little Mews houses back in the 1960s, you probably would have paid a couple of £1,000 for it, that kind of money. They weren't particularly nice buildings at that point. And if you just kept it and rented it out for all these years, you would now be sitting on a property that was worth £2 million, sometimes £3 million. If you think about that as a return on your investment, if you've been renting it out all those years, you couldn't have actually earned that money. Most people wouldn't have earned that money working their whole life. So no wonder all those foreign investors come over to London and snap up whole streets of property. Better than money in the bank, until of course it's not. And of course, if you look up, you can see that most of these properties around here have had another floor added to them. Not just a loft conversion, but a whole floor with a mansard roof. And of course, that gives them a lot more accommodation, doesn't it? And pushes the price up even more. So my estimate of £3 million for one of these places may be a little bit short of the mark. Look at the cracks up on that one, all around that bay. This is the Norwegian embassy, I'd say. Need to spend a bit of money. Now, this little corner property here, it used to be a corner shop at one time, owned by some Italians. It was called Benelli's, I think, and it was tumbling down a little bit. The entranceway on the corner was a little crooked, and now they seem to have straightened that out and filled it in, and they don't even use that entrance. But this is now a restaurant. And there's nothing to suggest that it's a restaurant there. It's owned by a Michelin star chef called Tom Aitken, and you've got to know somebody in order to get in here. You can't even get the phone number. So unless you're in the know, unless you know somebody, you won't get a place in this restaurant. They're definitely not going to let me in. And another thing I know about these places from my chauffeuring days is that not only have they got nice little restaurants tucked away and so on, they've also got a few ladies who are running businesses here. So once you've had a nice meal and a bottle of wine, you might just saunter up the road and pay a visit to one of these young ladies. And as a chauffeur, I've sat outside these buildings till 3 o'clock in the morning waiting for the boss to come out, roll out, jump in the back of the vehicle, home to the wife, snoring all the way. Those were the days. Now look at this, here's a major bit of work going on. Look at that staircase, just for the workers. You used to have to climb ladders when I started, carrying everything up on your nut. You got it easy, you guys. Now this is a lovely little pub, isn't it? The Horse and Groom. Been around for a while. That date actually isn't right when it says established on that date. That's actually when the brewery was established, not the pub. It was quite a well-known gay pub back in the day. And of course, the other thing that the Horse and Groom pub is known for is that this is where Brian Epstein, the manager of a little up-and-coming band called the Beatles, used to meet up every so often. Brian Epstein had a flat around the corner, and this little gay pub, whether he thought it would shock them or not, back in those days when being gay wasn't quite so fashionable as it is today. But anyway, Brian Epstein effectively turned the Beatles, perfectly good band playing the clubs and the pubs, into a boy band with their matching haircuts and their suits. The rest is history. There we go from that to obla-dee, obla-da. Perish the thought. So now I've left the noise of Knightsbridge, the traffic in Knightsbridge, and crossed over into Hyde Park. We're going to walk through Hyde Park into Kensington Gardens and then up to Notting Hill, which is on the north side of Hyde Park. And of course this is Rotten Row here. Got a good chance of getting run over by a horse if you're not watching where you're going, because this is, you can see all the soft ground here and all the horse hoof prints, and this is where they come to exercise the horses. Buckingham Palace is just down the road, so I would reckon a few of those horses that are housed there and the horse guards, this is where they come to run out. Bathurst Mews is the only remaining London Mews which has got horses in it, and this obviously was the original thing, so when you get in here it's quite a busy little place, and obviously they take people from here to Hyde Park, hence the name Hyde Park Stables, and the guy's just going out for an hour in the park. It's great that people can still do that in the middle of London, go for a horse ride. I guess the same is true in New York with Central Park and a few other places. And the pub is called the Stable Hand. Trade entrance. Look how narrow that doorway is. That's when people were thin. This is interesting. Sheet copper. I did a bit of that when I was learning my plumbing trade, because all that work, sheet lead, sheet copper, sheet zinc, that was all plumber's work. Nice bit of work actually. Look at all that step flashing there, all done in copper, standing seams. For all that, it's not an amazing looking building in the end. It's worth a go, wasn't it? Probably done a few years ago, and I wouldn't mind betting that the insulation isn't that great in it now. So if this is the way that they got up to the street in this Mews, and these were stables, and they had the carriage going out to the big house at the front, it's quite a steep little climb for the horse. Now, London is full of tunnels, it's full of sewers and underground trains and all sorts of things, and they all need venting. At various points around London, you've got ventilation shafts, sometimes cunningly disguised. But there are others like this one here, which people know about, but you'd probably walk past it without even noticing. And this is a ventilation shaft for what was the first underground railway in the world. Those steam trains, obviously the steam, the smoke, everything else needed to be vented. There were bits of it that were open and there were bits of it that were inside the tunnel. So every so often the train would emerge from the tunnel, puff of smoke, and away it would go. Now, in order to let that happen, they actually demolished some houses along here in this lovely terrace, and they decided that rather than leaving a gaping hole here, they would build a facade. So the engineers built a 1.5 metre thick facade to perfectly match the surrounding properties. You'd never know, and you'd walk past it without even noticing. And it's only when you start looking at the windows and you think those windows are never open. Those windows in fact aren't windows at all, and that isn't a house. But it's been cunningly disguised. You can see on the bottom they haven't even bothered making any windows, and in the front door they got 3 rather tasteful trees. Hopefully nobody tries to post any junk mail through there or misdelivered Amazon parcels. And they've even gone to the trouble of putting a little door entry in there with some fictitious names of people that supposedly live here. That's great, isn't it? They've got CCTV camera, and that's the next door house there. So they've got very quiet neighbours here, haven't they? I'm going to go round and have a look and see if we can find the back of it so you can see exactly what's involved. I'm not quite sure whether we'll get a view, but we'll have a go. So there you are, so you can see now that there is actually nothing behind that facade. There's just the steel braces holding the houses up on either side, and they put some nice piers in there to strengthen them. I thought it might be some kind of chimney effect there, but as you can see there isn't anything. It's just the facade and then the gap where the smoke and the steam used to come through. Very nice for the neighbours. Anyway, that's my little trip around the London Mews houses. There's a hell of a lot more to see, and if you ever fancy mooching down here, don't be put off. You can snoop down there. They are not necessarily public rights of way, but so long as you're respectful and you're just going to walk down and have a little look, no harm done. So come back and see me soon. We'll be having more walks around London looking at interesting things.